Bem-vindos ao Estudar Direito pelo Mundo, um podcast feito por mim, Klaus, com entrevistas e informações sobre como funciona estudar direito em diversas partes do mundo. Aqui você vai aprender sobre os requisitos para estudar direito em outros países, vai ouvir um pouco da experiência de outros estudantes e não se preocupe quando começar a ouvir eles falando em inglês, pois todas as partes têm tradução. Então convido vocês para ouvirem o episódio até o final e convidarem um amigo para ouvir também. Boa noite, galera! Hoje vou estar falando com o Hammad sobre direito na Austrália. Então, conto com a participação de vocês hoje para a gente aprender um pouco mais sobre como é cursar o curso de direito na Austrália, quais que são as especificidades, as diferenças de estudar na Austrália. Conto com a participação de vocês com perguntas e tudo mais. Algumas pessoas já me mandaram perguntas quando eu abri a caixinha. Então, conto com vocês. Em um segundo aí o Hammad já entra e a gente já pode começar a live. Hoje está muito calor aqui em Caçador, pelo menos na minha casa. E aí, vamos lá. Então, só mais um segundo, né? Lembrando que a gente vai falar sobre direito na Austrália, né? Vai ser como as últimas lives que eu tenho feito. Alright, vamos lá. Já tá entrando aí na ligação. Hello there, good evening.
Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, I
Hey,
can
how
hear
you
you all
going?
right. Yeah, first of all, what time is it now in Australia?
It's 10 a.m.
10 a.m. That's super funny because it's 8 p.m. in Brazil right now.
Big time difference, yeah. I'm glad we could make it work.
Yeah, I'm glad we could make it work too. Thank you so much for your time and willingness to join me tonight.
Anytime.
Alrighty. Well, so I'll go ahead and do like a quick introduction of you, just about you studying international relations and law and Indonesian. And then I'll do that in Portuguese and then I'll come right back to the questions, all right?
Sounds great.
Ok. Então, o convidado de hoje é o Hammad. Ele é da Austrália, né? Está estudando em Melbourne. E ele vai falar conosco hoje sobre diversos pontos interessantes dos estudos dele. E, olha só, uma modalidade muito interessante do que ele vai falar hoje é que ele estuda Direito, Relações Internacionais e a língua que é falada na Indonésia. Não sei se é chamado indonésio em português, porque eu não tive tempo de pesquisar isso, mas seria a língua Indonesian. Então, além de estudar Direito e Relações Internacionais, ele está estudando um idioma também durante a graduação. E vamos começar então com as perguntas. Alrighty, so to start us off, to kick us off in this live, I have been interviewing people from all over the world, and it's quite interesting to see the differences that there are in different countries about how to bem, você tem algum mercado específico?
Oh, I think you're back.
Okay. All right, great. I can see you now and hear you well.
Sweet. I've just got this here. I've connected it to my phone, so if there's any issues, I'll just be typing.
Okay, sounds good. That sounds great. Thank you. So the first question is, how does it work to enter law school in Australia? In different countries, it has a different system. So I was wondering, how does it work? Can you go from law school straight into studying it?
Yeah, sure. So, like in Australia generally, you finish high school around 18. So we have primary school generally. I'll list out the exceptions. So apart from Queensland, South Australia, and Western Australia, so primary education consists of a preliminary year followed by years 1 to 6, and then secondary school consists of years 7 to 12. So generally, year 10, you have like meetings with like your career pathway for example, your high school, and you talk about like your career ambitions, and then you start to study subjects usually tailored towards what you want to do towards university. But in high school, you're not required to study any specific subjects related to law. You just really have to do well in English as a requirement. If you want to translate that, and then I'll get back to the from the year 12.
Ok, sounds fantastic. Bom, o que ele acabou de me relatar, né? Eu pedi como que funciona para cursar Direito, então, na Austrália. Ele falou que lá no ensino médio, já nos últimos anos do ensino médio, eles já encontram-se com uma pessoa que vai ajudar eles na carreira, a pensar nos planos para o futuro, né? Um career advisor. E essa pessoa, que é um funcionário lá da escola, já vai indicar quais que são as matérias que ele deve fazer, pensando já nessa profissão do futuro. Então ele falou que como ele escolheu fazer Direito, né, não precisava fazer nenhuma aula relacionada a Direito no ensino médio, mas ele tinha que ir muito bem em inglês e fazer as aulas, as disciplinas de inglês, e ir bem nelas para poder continuar, então, na graduação em Direito. Alrighty, we can move on then.
Perfect. So as you would know, places like US, law is generally just postgraduate, like you can't enter undergraduate. It's different for most universities in Australia. So they basically offer undergraduate and postgraduate law courses. So I am at Trobe University, and they offer undergraduate law and they offer postgraduate law. So my process was in year 12, I applied through a system and I made Trobe University my first preference. And then basically, the scores that you need to study law across most universities in Australia ranges from a low 90 to like a high 90, depending on the university. Melbourne University is one of the only universities is the only university, to my understanding, in Victoria and Australia that you can't enter undergraduate. You have to complete undergraduate level, for example, like a Bachelor of Arts, to my understanding, and then you can transition. Yeah. Okay. So I made my application, and then I received my offer. I received an early offer because La Trobe has a special program. But most offers, let's say I finished in 2017, I received my proper offer to study at La Trobe the following year, in 2018, in January, and then I commenced in March.
Okay, got it. All right, so I'll go ahead and translate some of that. So let me just clarify something really quickly. So in order to become a lawyer, you can either do the undergrad law or the postgraduate law. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct. We'll talk about later some of the legal admissions tests, but yeah, undergraduate or postgraduate law will be able to get you into the practice as the starting point.
Okay, sounds good then. Então, acabamos de perguntar aqui pro Hammad sobre como que funciona para entrar na Universidade de Direito, né? A gente sabe que aqui no Brasil, por exemplo, você pode entrar direto depois do ensino médio. Em países como os Estados Unidos é apenas um curso postgraduate, né? Um curso depois da graduação. Então, como se fosse um curso depois de você ter um bacharelado, né? E aí eu perguntei como que isso funciona na Austrália. Então, na Austrália existem as duas possibilidades. Na universidade que ele está estudando, que é La Trobe, ele pode fazer tanto direito como um bacharelado, quanto direito como uma pós-graduação também. Então, tem as duas opções e você pode escolher optar por qual carreira, qual tipo de caminho que você quer passar para poder se tornar um advogado. A gente vai falar mais sobre requisitos para se tornar um advogado mais tarde, mas esses seriam as questões gerais. E aí ele falou que foi admitido no final do ano e o ano letivo dele, no primeiro ano, começou em março. Isso é, inclusive, uma das perguntas que alguém me perguntou sobre o ano letivo lá. Eu vou perguntar mais detalhes. Então, ele falou que começou a estudar Direito em março, depois do ensino médio dele. Alrighty.
Sweet. I'll also quickly outline there before we move on to the other questions is that so the undergraduate studies in law is known as a Bachelor of Laws, so LLB. So let's say I'm studying a Bachelor of Laws right now, or the LLB. People who have completed undergraduate studies and they want to complete law postgraduate, the postgraduate studies is often referred to as LLB graduate entry or Juris Doctor. Yeah, so it's just naming terminology. The law is generally 4 years straight around most universities. Some condense it into 3. Some might make it a little bit longer. I'm doing the law, international relations in Indonesian. We can talk about how that works a little bit later. I also just wanted to point out that there's some schools that require you to sit law school admissions test, LSAT, in Australia, but that's very few universities. So that's in order to be accepted into their postgraduate program. So Melbourne University, for example, requires you to sit an LSAT, although I believe that due to like COVID and some other circumstances, it's not required for 2021 intake. But that's generally what you want to do. It's like most places around the world, it's quite competitive to get into law. At the end, I can also answer, there are like universities offer some additional pathways to get into law. So we can talk about that maybe for some missed questions at the end.
Alrighty, sounds good. Bom, então, resumindo um pouco do que o Hammad acabou de falar, né? Ele falou sobre essa questão de direito poder ser uma pós-graduação. Inclusive, algumas universidades, como a Universidade de Melbourne, ela tem uma exigência que para você cursar direito como pós-graduação, você tem que fazer o teste LSAT, que é o mesmo teste que é feito nos Estados Unidos para você entrar no Juris Doctor, por exemplo. Então, você pode fazer um JD, né, que é o Juris Doctor, ou você pode ainda fazer o LLB, que é o bacharelado em direito, né? Então, ele estava explicando sobre essas diferenças e em resumo, seria isso dessa última pergunta. Então, falando sobre, você pode entrar no curso de Direito diretamente após o ensino médio? Então, a resposta é sim. Ele também comentou, né, que entrar no curso de Direito é um curso competitivo, né? E é algo importante você ter em mente quando vai fazer o processo seletivo e tudo mais. Alrighty, sounds great. Thank you so much for answering that.
No worries.
I might not just like follow an order of questions, but after that, thinking about, once you join law school and once you're into it, I did see, and you were mentioning, right, that you not only study law, but you also integrated some other things in your program. So how does that work? How does that path goes where you study law, international relations, Indonesian?
Sure. So people can choose to study a Bachelor of Laws on its own. Again, that's generally 4 years. I think I saw there's a university called RMIT now offers it 3 years, but I think that's quite condensed. So 4 years, but it's a very popular option in Australia and Victoria, to my understanding, to combine your studies of law with another area of passion. So I also study law and international relations. Now, studying law on its own would be 4 years, and studying international relations on its own would be 3 years. The beauty of the double degree is that it combines it into 5 years. So I will graduate with a Bachelor of Laws and Bachelor of International Relations. And so I still basically have to complete more law subjects. I forgot the exact weighting of the subject, sorry, but I'll be completing more law subjects than I am international relations subjects. But I graduate with both. And so, yeah, instead of my degree being 4 years, it's 5 years. And that's for the law and international relations. And my decision with that is I'm in no rush to complete my degree. I want to gain as much experience as possible. I'm in my 3rd year and I still feel like there's so much more I want to do. And there's a lot of plans that I have, which is a big reason with that. Additionally, some people choose to go the extra step and add a diploma in languages. So that adds another year to my studies. So I chose Indonesian as my diploma in Indonesian. So at the moment, concurrently, law, international relations, and Indonesian. 6 years, yeah. And I'll explain maybe after you translate why I chose the Indonesian diploma.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you so much. Well, acabamos de falar então um pouco sobre quais que são as formas de se estudar direito, né? Então ele falou que na universidade onde ele estuda, direito é um curso de 4 anos e em outras universidades pode ser de 3 anos, inclusive. Ele falou também que se ele fosse estudar direito e relações internacionais de forma separada, direito dura 4 anos e relações internacionais dura 3. Mas quando você combina os dois graus, digamos assim, você finaliza em 5 anos. Ele comentou também que, como ele não tem pressa para se graduar, e ele tem um pensamento estratégico que ele já vai falar sobre, as pessoas podem escolher, além de ter esses bacharelados, né, em temas diferentes, podem também escolher fazer um diploma em algum idioma. E aí ele escolheu fazer indonésio com os estudos dele. Então, além de estudar relações internacionais e direito, né, você... os diplomas que ele vai se tornar, né? Então vai se tornar um bacharel em Direito, um bacharel em Relações Internacionais e também vai ter esse diploma na língua indonésia quando ele se formar. E esse programa vai durar 6 anos. Alrighty, so it's all translated, and thank you so much for answering that. It's very interesting, you know, very different from what we have here. It's very very limited, I'd say, the ways you can study law along with another subject. It does happen though. I do know some people over Instagram and other, you know, social media channels that choose to do a double major, but it's not something like official, you know. So what I am personally doing, I'm doing a presential law degree, and then I'm doing an online degree in international relations in another university. So that's how mostly you can do it here in Brazil. So it's not all offered, you know, just one program in your university. Well, but the question now is, you know, why Indonesian?
Yeah, sure. So Indonesia is a very important country for Australia, very important bilateral relationship. And it's increasingly important now in terms of, you know, trade and economy. You know, Australia wants to diversify basically who it trades with. I think the important thing is, you know, especially with the rise of China and such, is Australia has an important relationship with China, but I think, you know, it doesn't want to be too dependent on China, depending on how things play out in the next 10, you know, to 15 years. There's a lot of interesting things happening, you know. So economy-wise, it's very important. Basically, you know, we're shared democracy, so important values. It's a strategic partner for military in Australia. It practices civil law, so it has a civil law system compared to Australia's common law system. So I thought it's this neighbour. It's of growing importance. It's a misunderstood country. I've heard the people are so friendly, and I've been there before, and they're just so friendly and hospitable. And my plan is hopefully from next year, depending on how COVID plays out, is to go overseas and intern with like a Indonesian NGO, learn about what they do, and also, you know, complete some studies over there. And it's such an important partner. You know, it's going to become one of the world's biggest and you know, economies. And so for Australia, it's the economy aspect, but it's also the people. And for me, that's the most important thing. I'm not just doing Indonesian because I see an opportunity to work there, you know, that will benefit me financially. It's to build really strong relationships with people in the region. It's kind of like how we're doing this interview here, how you reached out and, you know, you're over off in Brazil and we're building this connection. That's the kind of thing I want to do with Indonesia. I want to gain a civil law understanding, so maybe one day I can practice in the region and maybe help out Australia in some way to bridge the relations closer, maybe work on some trade agreements further, add my, you know, expertise, and to, you know, make some lifelong partnerships.
Wow, that's fantastic. Wow, thank you so much for sharing that. It's very valuable information, and I will confess that I was not aware of all of that. Então, o Hammad acabou de explicar por que ele escolheu fazer o estudo do idioma indonésio, né, junto com a sua graduação em Direito e Relações Internacionais. Então, atualmente, a Austrália tem relações bilaterais muito importantes e fortes, né, comerciais, com a Indonésia. eles também reconhecem a Indonésia como um dos países que vai se tornar uma das maiores economias do mundo e entendem também que eles são um país que muitas vezes é mal compreendido. Além disso, eles não querem ficar muito dependentes da economia chinesa, dependendo do que vai acontecer daqui a 10, 15 anos, então eles querem ter essa diversidade de fornecedores e também a diversidade de pessoas que estão comprando a mercadoria que eles estão vendendo. E pensando em tudo isso e também somando com a oportunidade que o Hammad já teve de estar na Indonésia, de conhecer as pessoas, de entender e achar que elas são muito hospitaleiras e muito amigáveis, ele decidiu estudar isso para que ele possa, talvez, trabalhar com isso no futuro. Ele já tem vários planos, assim, né? E comentou ainda que, por exemplo, a Austrália usa Common Law e já na Indonésia se usa Civil Law. E ele entende que é muito legal ter esse conhecimento dos dois sistemas jurídicos. Ele pensa que estudando Indonésia, ele vai poder ajudar o país dele também no futuro com diferentes acordos relacionados à troca de serviços e bens. Então, essas seriam algumas das razões pela qual ele está estudando indonésio, né? Inclusive, falou sobre um dos planos dele de estudar na Indonésia no ano que vem, dependendo do que Covid vai acontecer, né? Então, estudar na Indonésia, poder fazer um estágio em uma organização sem fins lucrativos lá, talvez estudar algumas matérias por lá também. Então, tem toda uma estratégia pensando por que ele está escolhendo esse degree. E também é muito óbvio que existe uma estratégia, senão a universidade não ia oferecer essa língua, né, se não tivesse tão grande importância, né? Well, that's just great. Thank you so much for sharing all of your plans and ideas. I was impressed about, Indonesia. I didn't know much about it beforehand. I do know where it is geographically speaking, but I don't know much about people. And, just learning now that it's a civil law country that made me really interested in it.
Yeah.
I'll
add there, sorry, too.
Yeah, please go ahead.
So I'll just quickly add there. So yeah, it's civil law. It's also got, interesting, Islamic law, and there's also some customary law because of previous, Dutch occupation, regulations. So it's very complex too. So that's a big challenge too, in terms of, I feel like common law system, can be it's difficult to understand at first, but there's some consistency. But in Indonesia, there's a lot of overlapping sort of laws that apply. And I guess, general knowledge, so the Indo-Pacific region, so Australia's kind of immediate region, India, Indonesia, Singapore, Thailand, Philippines, all those countries are, of increasing importance to Australia. Also, a lot of the Pacific Island countries, for example, Samoa or Tonga. So, because Australia wants to protect security in this region and build relationships here. And to add, in terms of the the double degree, like I'm doing Bachelor of Laws and Bachelor of International Relations, it's also popular, Bachelor of Laws, Bachelor of Criminology, or doing science. So there's quite a bit of flexibility in terms of what you can do. And we'll get around, I guess, talking about the structure of the law program when you get around to asking that.
Okay, sounds good. Então, uma outra coisa que o Hammad acabou de falar que é interessante, né, é que a Austrália está buscando fazer parcerias cada vez mais com os países que estão às suas redondezas, né, então países como Taiwan, Filipinas, Tailândia, Tonga, Samoa, né, países que estão por todo o Oceano Pacífico, né, então eles estão procurando essas parcerias comerciais e parcerias para poder ter também uma aliança estratégica militar, de proteção, então tem vários aspectos importantes nessas relações. Bom, além disso, ele falou que existem outras formas de combinar o bacharelado em Direito, então ele acabou de comentar sobre o bacharelado em Direito com criminologia, com ciências, são algumas das outras opções que existem, né? Hey, Barry, thanks so much for joining us today. So let me just introduce you to Barry, Hammad. Barry just joined me in a live last week about law in Ireland, and I'm sure it will be very valuable for us to continue learning about Australia with you today.
Hey, Barry.
Yay. Well, something also interesting that we would like to know more is, so we've covered some interesting facts. So we talked about when you join law school, how does it work, if you can go straight from high school. We've also covered about your specific degree. Maybe I was wondering if you have any, favorite subject or something like that. So we can also touch on that topic.
Yeah, sure. I'll outline in terms of required subjects. Well, actually, I'll answer my favorite, and then maybe I'll tell you about the mandatory subjects that you have to complete. I can't really think of a favorite subject. It's tricky. I think maybe constitutional law and statutory interpretation. So in constitutional law, we went through Australia's constitution, and how that applies, how that affects the appliance of law in Australia and the implications it has for the relationships in terms of the separation of powers between the judiciary and the legislature and the executive. And it's really interesting because Australia's constitution is quite different to the constitution in the US. It's very much a practical constitution and one more informed by economy. So, when the Bill of Rights was implemented in the US and the US Constitution came into being, there was a lot, there was like the Civil War, there was, the struggle for independence. So that informed a lot of the values that they have there in terms of such an emphasis on liberty and that kind of thing. In Australia, when the colonies, so there was like colonies, the UK came here, then some colonies were established, such and such. Around the late 1800s, they decided maybe it's time to become one for, trade purposes, for defense purposes. And so the federation, our constitution, is very much a practical one, setting out like the relationships between the states. It doesn't really set out individual protections like you have this express freedom to say what you like. They found like an implied freedom of communication, but there's not individual rights as there is in the US. And that's something really important to understand. Most of the human rights protections and such pass through legislation. That's what the founders of the Constitution thought. It'd be best to leave it with the legislature to make the decisions. Parliament. So, representative and responsible government, we elect them to represent our interests. They should pass laws that are in our interest and protect us. Statutory interpretation. Another interesting one is, it helped me learn how to analyze legislation. It was a very challenging subject because words can have a very different meaning. Like I found out like the word and, depending on the context, can mean or, in the legislation. Like, so if there's a list and it says, you must do this and you must do this, sometimes that and is a or. And so do you have to meet both of those requirements, or do you have to meet just one requirement, for example, for an offense to be made out? And so they're really, they've given me a lot of practical skills.
That's awesome. Yeah. Something that I have been studying for the past years is legal English per se. And I'd say that even in the language, there are a lot of, kind of tricks that you can get yourself into, with legalese and all these expressions. And do you call it legalese in Australia as well?
Yes. So there's a big emphasis in Australia on plain English, using plain English, making it approachable, and you struggle sometimes when you read old judgments or you read old legislation and it's just like a big sentence and you have to try and separate it out. It's very, especially when you're doing such long readings, plain English is such a great approach, I think, like setting out things clearly. Because, I think that's the measure of, the law needs to be understood. So it's all about making it as easy as possible for everyone to understand and apply. There's nothing smart about, like a very complex sentence. Some things can't be easily explained, yes, but in general, there's a big emphasis, especially in the statutory interpretation subject, about write in plain English. You don't have to use big Latin words all the time. Yes, sometimes they are nice to weave in and they explain concepts, but get your message across as clearly as you can. Same with when we do our legal writing and such.
Alrighty, thank you so much. I'll go ahead and translate about your favorite subjects and then about this thing about plain English. Então tá, uma conversa interessante que a gente teve agora. Primeiramente eu perguntei para o Hammad quais que são as suas matérias favoritas, né? Ele falou então que Direito Constitucional é uma das matérias favoritas dele, e aí ele me explicou algo bem interessante que eu não sabia. Ele falou que na Austrália, onde eles tiveram, né, o domínio então do Reino Unido por muitos anos no país, e por isso inclusive que eles falam inglês, mas decidiu-se então juntar todas as federações e fazer um país. E à medida que esse país foi feito, né, então criou-se uma Constituição. E essa Constituição ela foi muito mais prática do que constituições de outros países. Uma coisa muito interessante que ele falou sobre essa questão da Constituição ser prática é que ele falou que os direitos humanos, os direitos, por exemplo, como a liberdade de expressão, eles não estão escritos na Constituição, né? Eles podem ser compreendidos implicitamente, mas eles não estão escritos. Assim como na Constituição dos Estados Unidos e na Constituição brasileira, que a gente tem, né, muito bem escrito todos esses direitos que nós temos. Então, algo interessante é que na Constituição da Austrália você não encontra esses detalhes. E isso fez com que ele ficasse ainda mais interessado na matéria. Além disso, uma outra matéria que é uma das favoritas dele é uma questão de interpretação de estatutos. Então, essa matéria que ele tem serve exatamente para isso, para poder entender o que as leis estão falando, o que os contratos dizem, o que os acordos estão realmente dizendo, né? E aí eu falei para ele, olha, é algo interessante que você tem uma matéria para entender isso, né? E a gente comentou sobre a questão do inglês jurídico, né? Como o inglês jurídico é algo, né, importante e algo que acaba acontecendo naturalmente na língua à medida que ela evolui, mas infelizmente é uma linguagem que não é acessível, né? Ele até comentou um exemplo que em alguns estatutos você encontra a palavra and, que seria a conjunção de e, né? Uma coisa e outra, mas nos estatutos muitas vezes elas significam fazer isso ou aquilo, e elas são conectadas pela palavra and, que deveria significar e, né? Então, algo diferente, interessante. E aí ele falou que existe esse movimento muito forte para se usar o inglês puro, né? Plain English, na comunicação, na escrita, e é isso que eles aprendem na universidade, né? Para que eles não fiquem presos no legalese, né? Que seria o inglês jurídico, né? O juridiquês, como a gente chama aqui pro português, no correspondente para o português. Wow, that is fantastic. In the past few weeks, we have been talking a lot about legal English in this page, and it's just interesting to see its differences and its importance around the planet.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, thank you so much once again for all of your answers. I was thinking if there is something else you'd like to add. I don't have all the questions I sent you, so I try to make it as fluid as possible, trying to follow subjects as they come along. So I know you did prepare a lot. So I was wondering if you'd like to add something, and we can just keep talking and adding on to what we have built so far.
Yeah, so I'll just add, even though there's flexibility, say with doing the international relations in Indonesian, there's core subjects, a number of core subjects that you have to complete in Australia. You can't complete them elsewhere in order to graduate. These are called the priestly 11 subject, like priest, but add the ly, priestly 11 subjects. So I'll list them out. You can let me know if I need to repeat them, but it's criminal law and procedure, torts, contract law, property law, equity and trusts, company law, administrative law, federal and state constitutional law, civil procedure, evidence, and ethics and professional responsibility. So those subjects, basically the Legal Admissions Board, all graduates in Australia, no matter where you study, you've got to complete these key 11 subjects. However, universities differ in the way that they offer the priestly 11. So I told you before that there was criminal law and procedure. I did criminal law in my first year, but I didn't do criminal procedure. Criminal procedure, they decided to teach it as a different subject. So when I complete that next year, hopefully, I'll have completed criminal law and procedure, but I did it in a different way. Contract law. Some universities teach contract law in 1 semester. I did contract law over 2 semesters, contract law A and contract law B. Some people do torts law over 2 semesters in other universities. They learn about things, so they do like, let me think. So let's say, for example, they might do defamation and nuisance like in 1 semester, and then they dedicate a whole semester to negligence because it's so complicated. And then another example is property law. I did foundations of property law 1 semester and then real property law split over 2 semesters. Some universities do it all in 1 semester. So, universities differ in the way that they run it for different reasons. Some subjects are better suited to be run across 2 semesters because they're a bit more complex. But at the end of the day, you have to complete those priestly 11 subjects in order to graduate. And so with just a law degree alone, there's not many electives. So for me, with my everything, like in terms of my law degree, I have 6 elective subjects. The rest of them are all core. I have to complete them in Australia.
Ok, got it. All right. Bom, algo interessante que ele falou é que existem matérias obrigatórias, né, assim como a gente tem aqui no Brasil, então tem esse core curriculum, né, que são as matérias que são obrigatórias para que as pessoas possam se formar em direito mesmo, né, e uma coisa interessante é que essas matérias têm que ser completadas na Austrália, não pode ser em outro país. Então ele comentou sobre algumas delas, né, e são algo muito semelhante do que a gente tem aqui no Brasil, como matérias mandatórias, né, matérias obrigatórias, enfim, que são matérias de direito constitucional, de direito civil, de direito criminal, então as matérias desse jeito. E aí o que ele comentou é algo que é assim, por exemplo, eles chamam elas de Priestly 11, né, que são as 11 matérias obrigatórias. E essas matérias, então, tendo essa obrigação de fazer cada uma delas, elas são, de certa forma, flexíveis para a universidade oferecer elas. Então, um exemplo que ele comentou é que ele fez direito penal, só que ele não fez processo penal junto com direito penal. E se você fosse ver a lista das Priestly 11, seria direito penal e processo. Como ele não fez processo penal e direito penal junto, ele vai ter que fazer essas 2 matérias de forma separada, porque a universidade dele oferece dessa forma, para poder se formar em direito. Talvez se ele fizesse em outra universidade, ia ser processo, tipo, direito penal e processo penal, sendo uma matéria só. Então, algo interessante também, né, para a gente ver como as universidades detêm certa flexibilidade nesse sentido. Well, okay, that's quite interesting. Something that I thought it was especially interesting is that we have a lot of subjects on civil law here. We call it civil law when we talk about, contracts, when we talk about property, when we talk about real estate. All these things are inside this subject we call civil law. And it's interesting to think about how we unnamedly have those priestly 11 as well, in order to graduate in a law program that is, bar approved. We also do have to go through those core disciplines, core courses. So that's quite interesting. I liked learning about it very much.
And that's another reason why, because if you just do law, you only have a limited amount of electives, and that limits your opportunities, for example, to go overseas. So that's another reason why I chose international relations and Indonesian. It gives me more elective subjects. So hopefully, depending on how COVID plays out, I can spend a semester or perhaps a year abroad. So that's another strategic thing to consider. If you just do law, because so many of them are core, especially say, like we're talking about, some, I think, offer like a 3 years. 3 years, there's not a lot of time to do electives. They're really just, trying to get you core. But for me, 4 years and then the extra years that I have, more flexibility to go overseas and build up my skills and experiences.
Okay, that's fantastic. I do love the idea of, doing an exchange program and such things. And something that happens here, I feel like I am in a rush to graduate, and how law school is a 5-year-long program in Brazil. I chose, or I tried not to go on an exchange program so far. So what I'm trying to do is to do online now, and you know, reach out to different universities to do some studying and some, you know, anything they offer that is online. And also what I tried doing is to participate in different conferences in winter and summer schools in different countries. So that's the alternative I'm trying to use because of these, you know, very limited curricula as well. Well, I'll go ahead and translate what you just said. Então, ponto que o Hammad acabou de falar é que ele também escolheu não fazer só direito, fazer relações internacionais também, porque o número de matérias eletivas em relações internacionais, nessas outras áreas de estudo que ele está seguindo, são maiores, né? Então, ele tem outras oportunidades de poder estudar fora, de fazer intercâmbio. Todos esses pontos ele consegue fazer. Se ele estudasse só direito, isso não ia ser possível, uma vez que o curso de direito ele é só 4 anos, a maioria das matérias são core, né? São matérias obrigatórias, então para continuar fazendo o tempo que ele queria e poder ainda né, ter essa experiência internacional, fazer com que as habilidades dele fossem desenvolvidas. Então, tudo isso não haveria tempo útil para ser feito em uma graduação que dura apenas 4 anos. Então, por isso também, a escolha dele de fazer Relações Internacionais junto com o diploma em indonésio. Well, thanks for sharing that as well. It's very interesting, you know. I love how strategic your career is at this point, you know. We here in Brazil, we don't have any kind of, you know, career advisor during high school. And we also are a country of first generation college students. So most people are the first generation going through college. And I feel that a big struggle people have is that we don't really, you know, prepare a career plan, even though I do enjoy the flexibility of it, you know, just don't being very stuck on it. I do like the idea of, you know, outlining a career path that you want to follow, you know, based on international relations, based on economy, based on, you know, data. And I feel like I really enjoyed learning about how you planned out your career in your studies to fulfill those, you know, professional plans. I think that's just amazing.
Thank you. Yeah, so even for me, even though my ambition is to work like with a multinational law firm or government department, you know, there's still a lot that can happen in the next few years in terms of shaping where I want to go, what firm exactly that I want to practice with, or what area of law I want to perhaps specialize in. So I think, yeah, the great thing is I felt very supported to be able to create like a plan, but it's not set in stone 100%. I'm open to things coming along and changing up the way I do things.
That's great. I think that's super necessary as well, you know. I do like the idea of, you know, being open to new opportunities and hopefully they'll show up for you and you'll be able to, you know, pick the best ones for your life and career.
Same goes, well, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I think we can approach the end of this, you know. I was wondering what else you'd like to share with people. Please feel really free to say anything you'd like. If you want to give, you know, a motivational message or something. Just before that, let me ask, how does the school year works? So first of all, I'll just explain really quickly how it works in Brazil so you can know, and then you tell me how it works in Australia.
Sure.
So here in Brazil, we start school in February, go until June, and then we have a break during the winter. And then we go from July until late November, beginning of December. So we call it like 2 semesters. So we start in the beginning of the year, we finish in the end of the year. We have, you know, Christmas and pretty much all January as vacation. How does that work in Australia? Because I do know that we are, you know, having the same, you know, we're both during the summer months, we're both during the winter months. So how does that work?
Yeah, it seems pretty similar then. Basically, you commence semester 1 in March, generally. Mm-hmm. So for first year students, they might do orientation like a week or 2 weeks before you actually start. So March until about June, late June, and then we have like a winter break, which is generally around late July. So I think next year we'll be commencing July 20. This year it was July something. And then it's from July until about usually November. So I finished a bit earlier compared to previous years because of how the university adjusted to COVID. They kind of shortened the exam period and swapped back like to study, like the period you have to catch up and study. So I finished up on November 4th. That was actually the last day of the exam period. So now I'm technically on holidays until March next year.
Wow.
Which is, so that's about 5 months, yeah. But usually I would have finished maybe around November 24 or something like that, like towards the end of November. And that, yeah, again, it would have been until March. Obviously, you do some things like you can do summer subjects if you choose to, depending on what's offered. So I know a lot of my friends are choosing to do a sports law elective subject.
Okay.
They might do an elective from their other degree, like the international relations. But in terms of conventional, it's 2 semesters like you. Some universities offer trimester, 3 semesters. I think Victoria University does that. I'm not sure exactly how that works, but it is basically 3 semesters compared to the usual 2 that we both have. So yeah, it seems pretty similar. You seem to be starting a little bit earlier in February. We start in March, but it's roughly the same in terms of Christmas off and such.
Ok, great. Bom, eu perguntei como que funcionava os semestres, né? Férias no final do ano e tudo mais. Então ele me explicou que eles têm 2 semestres, assim como a gente aqui no Brasil. A diferença é que esse ano, por conta do Covid, eles estão terminando mais cedo. Então ele vai ter de novembro até março de férias. E por conta desse período ser bem extenso, muitas pessoas escolhem por fazer matérias que são oferecidas durante esse período de férias. Então ele falou que vários dos amigos dele estão fazendo matérias eletivas. Ele também poderia escolher fazer algumas matérias de relações internacionais durante esse período, né? Eles chamam de summer school, alguma coisa nesse sentido, que são as matérias ofertadas durante os meses de verão, né? Enquanto você poderia ou fazer férias ou participar dessas summer disciplines, summer courses, e então ter, né, esse tempo de estudar durante o tempo que a maioria dos estudantes estão de férias também. All right, that's quite interesting. It's funny to see, how many things are very, very close, in different countries.
Yeah, for sure.
The more people I interview here, the more I realize that's so interesting.
Yeah. Did you want me to touch, depending on you with time, did you want me to touch briefly on like how clinics work and such?
Oh, yeah.
Do you have the time for that?
Yeah, definitely. That would be great. If you could just say briefly, if you do have to do a mandatory pro bono work, clinic, etc., that would be great. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So if you want to generally with commercial firms, like we have like Allen's over here and such, if you want to join up to those firms after you graduate, usually you have to complete something called a clerkship. You complete that in your penultimate year, which is the year before you graduate. So if I was completing a 4-year degree, my penultimate year would be 3 if I was to finish next year. And a clerkship, you apply for them. It can be quite intense. You apply for lots of different firms, commercial, and they do a bunch of interviews with you. They'll do screening, like they'll do tests and they'll do an interview, and then you do like an internship with them. And then if they like you, they'll offer you a graduate position. There's a little bit more to that, but for the sake of being condensed. If you don't want to do commercial law, you don't really have to do clerkships. Some people aren't interested in working in commercial law firms. They want to work with perhaps like a local law firm or a boutique law firm. So it might not be required. La Trobe offers, and other universities offer, the ability to do, so some require you to do clinics, internships, pro bono. La Trobe encourages it strongly, so you can do it through your elective subjects. So I can choose to do, like next year, a placement somewhere with like a community legal center or another like organization. And it's encouraged because, you know, experience. So some people are so smart and capable that they can get in with just good marks, but generally it's not the case. Law firms really treasure a breadth of experience. That includes competing in competitions, you know, moots and negotiations, and also includes things like participating in community legal center work, doing volunteering work, or sourcing your internship. And you have the ability to source your internship you're on your own, and you obviously balance that with university and your commitments, or you can go through the university to do it, or both. So that's open to you. So, but yeah, in terms of commercial law, like the thing that most law graduates will go for are clerkships, those internships. They're the real prestigious ones that hopefully get you into the top to medium level, like law firms in Australia.
Okay, great. All right. So I'll go ahead and translate some of that. Então eu perguntei sobre a questão de núcleo de práticas jurídicas, de trabalho pro bono, né? O que é obrigatório se fazer na Austrália, né? Porque aqui no Brasil, que eu saiba, é um requisito para a OAB reconhecer o curso de Direito, inclusive, né? Que se tenha um núcleo de práticas jurídicas onde os alunos, os acadêmicos vão aprender na prática como que é o dia a dia de um advogado, né? Quais que são as petições obrigatórias. Inclusive, são essas peças que você vai usar lá no exame de ordem e tudo mais. E aí eu perguntei como que isso funciona na Austrália. E na Austrália você pode escolher fazer um clerkship, que seria um tipo de estágio específico para trabalhar com direito comercial. E aí ele falou que se você quiser trabalhar com direito comercial, trabalhar em uma firma, né, em um escritório de advocacia que for muito bom, que for um escritório padrão, assim, né? Você teria que fazer esse clerkship no penúltimo ano da faculdade, mas se você pretende não trabalhar com essa área, não é obrigatório fazer o clerkship de forma alguma, né? Ele falou também que a universidade sempre recomenda, né, tá fazendo com que seja muito fácil para que os alunos façam trabalho pro bono, façam outros tipos de clínicas, mas nada disso é um requisito obrigatório. Tudo isso são feitos através de matérias eletivas, feitos através de outras coisas que não matérias obrigatórias. Né? Okay, that's super interesting because here it's mandatory. So I always thought it was interesting. And earlier this year, I went to the Arizona State University in February, and I had the chance to participate in a conference there. So one of the things that I really liked that the Dean of Law said is that he doesn't believe that, you know, pro bono, you know, clinics should be a mandatory thing, but what they do is to make it extraordinarily easy for students to do it if they want to. And he's always happy to see that, you know, in the graduates reports, they always will have maybe like 95% of a class that will graduate will have done some pro bono work during their 3 years of their JD. So it's just a very interesting concept for me.
Yeah, I think also it's also about passion. I think compulsory is good because you get experience, but I also think, and I agree with making it as easy as possible. Some people obviously can't do pro bono because of their financial circumstances. Not everyone can afford to do pro bono work. Some people need to find a paid internship or paid work while they work, you know? You know, there are internships that you can get paid while working. So those are options. And I've done community legal center work, and, you know, in due time, I'll be looking for some probably paid legal work just so I can support myself and my family, you know, in terms of that. But I think it's that option. And I think when it's not compulsory, but it's easy to access it, it shows that you're passionate. Like, it's not being forced upon you, but you still want to do it for experience and to make a change. For example, if you're a community legal center, or maybe you want to work in like employment law, or maybe you want to help out people with things like rent law and such. So I think it's really important that graduates do it, but have some flexibility in the way that they do it.
Yeah, great. Let me just ask something really quickly. I don't know if Instagram will kick us out or not, so it might. But anyways, então, gente, eu só vou fazer mais uma pergunta. Eu tô com medo que o Instagram acabe a live automaticamente, sabe? Então, só fazer mais uma pergunta. Qualquer coisa eu explico no stories em seguida, tá? So that's something really interesting. You know, here in Brazil, law school is often offered at night. So we have classes from 7 p.m. to 10 p.m. And that happens because most students, as I mentioned, are first generation college students, and they'll have to work during the day in an 8-hour job that's mostly often not an internship, but a full-time position that's not related to law in most cases. And they'll have to do that in order to pay for their tuition to work at night. So I was wondering, how does it work in Australia? Is it common for people to work while they are studying in order to pay for their schooling? Is the schooling very expensive and hard for people to get in? If you could tell me a little bit about that, that would be very interesting.
Sure. So briefly, the Australian government, look how it works with university is for Australian citizens, most people will be able to get government support. And so the government will basically give you like a loan. It won't put the money in your account, but it will give you a loan in which to complete your subjects. So you're not required to basically pay your fees directly unless you choose to do so. So it basically, the government, you know, you'll be indebted to the government. And the government will often subsidize a lot of courses. Not every course, to my understanding, is subsidized, but a lot of courses are subsidized depending on the government's preferences of what it wants with graduates to graduate with. So at the moment, I don't pay any direct university fees. So I can give you an example. One of my subsidized law subjects, it usually sits about $1,394, I believe, per subject. But I don't pay that direct. That goes on my HEX. And so law, and the government's going to increase fees basically for people next year for law, and it's going to like reduce some fees for students in like maths and like teaching and languages because it's more in the government's priorities. But basically, once I graduate and I earn above a certain threshold, let's say, for example, $45,000, I'll slowly pay the government back. They'll take from my paycheck. But it works different to a normal loan because it's not like a loan with 10% interest, which is great. Let's say the US, you know, the loan system's very crazy over there. Like you graduate with a big burden unless you have scholarship here. Here, it's not too bad, I believe. So, for example, I'll graduate, and once I start earning above a certain threshold, I will pay back the government slowly. Once I say, let's earn above 45,000. And yeah, the great thing is it's indexed more to match inflation, not to charge like 10% interest. So if it's, let's say, $50,000 now, maybe, let's say for 10 years, I don't meet the minimum wage to pay it, it's not going to turn into like $60,000, $70,000, $80,000, $90,000 unless the inflation went crazy. You know, inflation's pretty stable, so it'll be adjusted slowly. That's my understanding. So it might be 50,500, 51,000, but it'll be matched. So that's the great thing. For non-citizens, you know, Australia is a very prime. Obviously, things are being affected because of COVID-19. But I believe that the third biggest source of revenue for the Australian government, for Australia, was international students.
Wow.
That's where, yes. So correct me, I can double check that before, but it was very lucrative before COVID-19. And my friend Moe over here, Mose, he made a good point. I'll bring it up about Centrelink, but international students will pay sometimes 4 or 5 times more for a subject. It can be quite expensive, and they're expected to generally pay upfront compared to Australian citizens. So we'll graduate with the same degree, but yeah, generally it's quite expensive for international students to study here. There's not really as much of the government support. There might be scholarships, those kind of avenues available, but yeah. As my friend brought up, the government also pays low-income students government support too, like money, like Centrelink. So, for example, like maybe $400 every fortnight to help you with, say, your study and buying, you know, things for food. And it depends, like if you've moved interstate, they might pay you a little bit more. If you've come to resettle, they pay you a little bit more. If you are living with your partner, they might pay you a little bit more. Yeah.
Okay.
So if there's anything you need me to repeat or explain with that, let me know.
Okay, so I'll try to translate most of things, and then if I, forget anything, I'll let you know. Okay.
Yeah, there's a lot there, so let me know.
Então, gente, teve tanta coisa legal aqui que eu quero traduzir um pouco, sabe? O que o Hammad estava falando, primeiramente, né? A gente falou sobre o núcleo de práticas jurídicas e eu falei que aqui é obrigatório, ele falou que lá não é obrigatório, mas ele falou que muitos estudantes não conseguem fazer um estágio que seja pro bono, né? Que eles não recebam nada em troca, por conta de ter que pagar também pelos custos, né? Poder ajudar a família. E aí, tocou num ponto que eu pensei, bom, aqui no Brasil, a maioria dos estudantes estuda à noite por conta de ter que trabalhar durante o dia para pagar a faculdade e, enfim, para poder sobreviver, né? Então, como que isso funciona na Austrália? Foi a minha dúvida. E ele falou algo bem interessante, que o governo australiano, ele dá subsídios e ele faz um tipo de financiamento estudantil também lá, com uma taxa baixíssima e que é paga depois que você termina a sua graduação, e não só isso, depois que você atinge um determinado valor salarial. Então, só depois que você ganha, ele falou, por exemplo, né, 45 mil dólares, que você vai estar começando a pagar o governo de volta pela sua educação. E aí ele falou que isso é só para nacionais. Comentou que os estudantes internacionais são uma das maiores fontes de dinheiro para a Austrália. Ele falou que sabe, né, de alguns colegas dele que eram internacionais, e eles vão pagar até 5 vezes mais para fazer a mesma disciplina que ele. Então, algo interessante, né, pensar que os estudantes internacionais podem ser uma fonte de renda para um país. É interessante pensar que essas relações, assim, vir alguém para estudar, além de movimentar a economia por estar estudando aqui, por estar tendo que viver no país, tem todo esse sentido também que eles acabam pagando mais e talvez até seja por conta disso, né, que os outros conseguem estudar sem receber dinheiro. Ele também comentou que, além de pagar mais, né, os estudantes internacionais eles têm que pagar logo no início de cada matéria, né, diferente dos nacionais, então eles têm que chegar e já pagar. Então, vários pontos assim, né, que fazem com que o estudante internacional acabe sendo uma fonte de lucro, né, muito grande para o governo e para a instituição. Just a last question, I guess. Do you have a lot of international students in your classes? Did you get to meet a lot of people from other countries?
I met a few during law, not that much. La Trobe had a decent amount of international students. I don't think as much as some other institutions, but still a decent amount. I met more in my international relations degree. Mm-hmm. I think, it's also like a little bit trickier with law because, again, it's more for you to practice like in Australia. But something like international relations, I met a few international students, and I met some international students outside of my discipline too, in other capacities. Like a lot, study, I think engineering is quite popular. There's also like health-related subjects that are quite popular.
Do you have like a top country, like most international students will come from this specific country to Australia, or do you know?
I think China was quite popular. So I'm speaking about everything before COVID-19 because now it's been so heavily affected, so that's it's also, a lot of universities have suffered now because of the way they rely too much like on international students for like income. So like a lot of universities are cutting costs, cutting subjects. It's a very interesting time. So one day I could even follow that up with you, like what happens. But before, I think it would be places like China, India. I think India is quite popular with like a lot of Indian students like to come to La Trobe. We even have a great partnership with like some of the universities. And one of the Bollywood actors, Shah Rukh Khan, actually came once to La Trobe to announce like a special scholarship. So there was a great turnout, even though the weather was so bad on the day. He got a lot of his fans come in. I think Indonesia is quite popular, and those would be the main ones. But there's other places. They come from the US. They come from Philippines. I just can't give you the exact statistics off the top of my head. But
that's all good.
China and India are, to my understanding, probably the most popular.
Ok, great. Bom, a última pergunta que eu fiz é qual o país que mais manda, então, né, estudantes internacionais para estudar na Austrália. E ele falou que a China e a Índia são os países que têm mais estudantes. Inclusive, comentou que uma atriz ou um ator de Bollywood já foi na universidade dele para estudar e tudo mais, né? Então, gente, se vocês têm mais alguma pergunta, podem mandar para mim no direct, que aí a gente vai estar conversando depois. Eu vou perguntar para o Hammad, a gente dá um jeito de responder. Mas vou terminando a live aqui. Obrigado por todo mundo que ficou até aqui. Obrigado pelo seu tempo, pelo seu suporte. Espero que vocês tenham aprendido tanto quanto eu, né? Achei super interessante aprender sobre estudar direito na Austrália, enfim, sobre a Austrália em geral, né? Tá tão distante da gente e não é muito comum a gente ter pessoas compartilhando essas experiências conosco. Well, Hammad, thank you so much for your time, for your willingness to join me here today. I've learned so much about Australia. I kind of want to, you know, just hop in a plane and start studying at La Trobe tomorrow, you know? So thank you so much for everything.
No, anytime. Thank you so much for your time. And I hope I was able to help out like the audience here with information. If you'd like any follow-up questions, for example, I've got some brief notes on the steps you need to take after you practice to get into studies. If you have any other questions that come through, so I can outline some things like what you need to do after you get your law degree to go into practice, and I can also outline, you know, maybe some information on competitions. But it was such a privilege being with you today. So thank you so much for reaching out.
Thank you so much, and I hope you have a fantastic Sunday, while I'll have a great Saturday night.
Cheers, man. I'll speak to you soon. Take care, everyone. Okay. Thank you for joining.
Cheers. Thank you so much. Gente, tchau, tchau. Obrigado mais uma vez, hein? Tenham um ótimo resto de sábado aí para todos. Tchau, tchau.